Hello, we learn about insulin today. This is a quick revision lecture. So we'll talk about the structure, the physiological role, the pathology, types of insulins, management regimens, and tips. So insulin exists as a monomer, which is the active physiological um, molecule, and the hexamer, which is the inactive form of insulin. Basically, insulin is stored in the pancreatic beta cells as a hexamer, which is also crystal form. And this is the way long-acting insulins are formulated, because if you just stabilize the hexamer form, insulin forms a crystal structure which cannot be used as a physiological hormone, and also the solubility is greatly reduced, so this causes the insulin to be diffused very slowly. And this is all a revision. Insulin is stored in the pancreatic beta cells, so it's released when the concentration of glucose increases in the blood. It's not really fully understood how this system cascade signal cascade works, but it's thought that there's a change in the membrane permeability, there's electrical excitation, whatever it is. The most important thing to know is when glucose increases, insulin is released into the blood to reduce the concentration of glucose in the blood. So also remember, insulin is an anabolic hormone, which basically increases the synthesis of glycogen, the uptake of fatty acids, and resulting in weight gain. It also reduces the oxidation of fats, glycogen breakdown, and as a result, it causes weight gain. So if you remember, one of the side effects of insulin is weight gain, and that's why it's also not used in very obese patients, because it increases extra weight gain. So, if we go back to type 1 and type 2 diabetes, the type 1 diabetes is more common in children, type 2 more common in some ethnic groups, and with some risk factors like of being overweight, and um, as we said, as in some ethnic groups. So if we go on, insulin is a high risk medicine, because remember, if you misuse insulin, if you remember to eat your snacks when you had your insulin, or if you take double dose of insulin and swapping the two different kinds of insulin is like long acting and short acting, it could result in severe um, significant morbidity. So it's very important that patients know which type of insulin they use, and also when dispensing to make sure that the correct type of insulin is dispensed. And there are many types of insulins. Some rapid acting analogs, which are a modified version of human insulin, like the Lispro, the Blausen, and the Aspart. They act very quickly. Regular insulin, which is human insulin, also called soluble insulin, which is normal human sequence insulin. It takes a little bit longer to be dissolved in the blood. The intermediate acting, like the ISSN, which is basically insulin, which added with protamine, the neutral protamine hagedon, and the mixed analogs and the long-acting analogs like the glargine, dentamere, and degludec. So if you go through all of them, these are the analogs, the Novo Rapid, which is the Aspart, these are the cartridge, and this is the Flex Pen, this is the Humalog, which is the human Lispro, I think, and the Abidra, which is the human Glulysin. These are rapidly acting insulins, they act within 10 minutes, and they are very suitable for type 1 diabetes who use the pump infusion. These are regular human insulin like Actor Rapid and the Humulin R. I've also seen the Humulin S, which is basically soluble insulin. This is also a short-acting insulin, but it's not as fast as the analogs. The analogs act within 10 minutes, so that's why you can use the analogs shortly before meals or even shortly after meals. But the human insulin you have to use 30 minutes before meals. And these are the intermediate acting insulins: Humulin I, the Insuman basal, and the insulitard. So if you look at the letter I, they usually it's is something to um, describe or distinguish between the intermediate acting and the mix. They usually contain like this I, which basically means intermediate acting. If you see the Insuman and also the insulitard, because there are also some combinations like the Insuman Com, the Novomix, the Humulin M3, the cartridge, and the quick pen. So basically, the mixture contains intermediate acting with short acting insulins in pre-mixed pens. So some patients can mix the intermediate acting with short acting insulins like the human and the analogs, or they come in pre-mixed pens like the Novomix and the Humulin, or in cartridge as well. And these are the long acting, the Tresiba, which is the Decludag, the Glargine, and the Detima. And if you look at these names, if you see the Tresiba Flex Touch, Flex Pet, and the Solo Star, I think the Lantus is Solo Star, and the Levemir is Flex Pen, which basically are different devices. So some say the Flex Pen is more accurate than the Solo Star, although I'm not sure about this. And also the flex touch is advertised as more suitable for patients with dexterity problems, as you don't have to turn the dial, because remember, when you have to take insulin dose, you have to turn the dial. So they say the flex pen is easier because it doesn't extend as much as the pen flex pen. So if you go on, there are different doses of insulin, um, and there's no single dose for insulin. If you look at the BNF, wherever you look, there's no single dose. All they say is contact the diabetes team. So the reason is differences in sex, men, female, difference in weight, difference in the types of meal you eat. Sometimes you could eat a vegetarian lunch, you could eat a mixed grill, or you could eat the Mac, um, or between old and young, and also in puberty, because it increases the requirement for insulin increases during puberty. So there's no dose for insulin, but different regimens like multiple daily regimens, infusion pumps, different units. Some patients use up to 100 units per day who use these pump infusions. Um, so if someone's also suffering from hypoglycemia, there's a need for frequent finger prick checking. So if there's hypo, you need to use fast acting insulins like um, fizzy drinks or sugar or honey or whatever you could get, um, as long as it's fast acting glucose. Also, rotate the injection site, allergic reactions, both the human and the analogs, and also the animal insulin. The only one I've seen is the hypoporin, which now rarely used. There's also the hypoglycemia is also increased by ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, alcohol monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Especially, binge drinking is very dangerous if someone is taking insulin, because the risk of hypo could be greatly increased, and also hyper um, steroids, diuretics, and beta-1 agonists basically antagonize the effect of insulin, which means you need to take more insulin. Also, beta blockers cause the masking of tachycardic symptoms, which is a symptom for hypo. And then the need for insulin is increased at times of stress, trauma, surgery, and if someone has fever or infection. And the insulin need could be reduced if someone has a vomiting or diarrhea, because it could be lost through vomiting or diarrhea. And also remember, the complication is diabetes. Diabetes is a vascular disease. So if you look at all the long-term symptoms and even the short-term complication of diabetes is diabetic ketoacidosis, which means a metabolic derangement of acids and the ketones in the body. And then the longer term is retinopathy, nephropathy, uh, and neuropathy. So it's all about vascular disease. So it's very important that someone is on the right units of insulin, both for short term and long term. And this sliding scale regimen is usually used for highly motivated individuals, which is a frequent testing of glucose concentration in the blood, and then adjusting the units of insulin. So it's also important that a frequent monitoring of insulin, especially during illness, before meals, after meals, and the monitoring of ketones in the urine. Also, the patient education that the patients need to self-adjust their insulin, and the contact of this DAFNIs, the dose adjustment for normal eating in diabetes, with a multidisciplinary team, which basically teaches patients the amount of carbohydrate content in their food. It's also important patients take the fast-acting glucose, whether it's honey, raisins, or whatever it is. Especially the glucogel is very useful if someone is having hypo or goes unconscious, so that other people could basically rub the glucogel to their cheeks so that they don't have the risk of choking. And also, it's important to teach patients to insert the needle at 90 degrees, keep it in the skin for 10 seconds, and to avoid cold insulin, and also to rotate or roll the insulin pen so that they do not disturb the crystal structure of insulin.